In August 1988, West German police stormed a quiet, seemingly normal house in the town of Bosenheim. They went in with weapons drawn, fully expecting to take down, a criminal mastermind.
Right, they were expecting a Bond villain.
Exactly. But when they breached the kitchen, they didn't find some evil genius. They found a middle-aged, retired U.S. Army sergeant sitting at his table, just calmly eating a bowl of cereal.
Yeah, it's wild. The lead investigator yelled at him to put his hands up, and the guy barely even blinked.
And what the tactical team couldn't fully comprehend in that moment was that the man at the breakfast table had already sold the complete, unredacted blueprints for World War III.
And, that contrast between the totally mundane reality of the man himself and the apocalyptic scale of his crimes is what makes this case so chilling.
It really does. Welcome to this deep dive. Our mission today is to unpack a really comprehensive intelligence history report, drawing from military assessments, historical reconstructions, and counterintelligence files.
We're looking at the espionage case of Clyde Lee Conrad. And if you look at the broader context of the Cold War, the NATO-Warsaw Pact standoff relied entirely on a balance of power.
Right.
We aren't just talking about a few leak memos here. We're looking at a scenario where if the Cold War had actually turned hot, the intelligence this man handed over meant NATO would have faced certain defeat within 3 days.
3 days. That's just catastrophic. Now, just to set some ground rules for you listening, we're going to touch on some intense geopolitical realities today. But our goal here is strictly historical reconstruction and strategic evaluation.
Exactly. We're here to follow the facts and analyze a massive systemic failure, not endorse any political ideology.
Right. So to understand how the literal blueprints for the defense of Western Europe ended up in Moscow, we first have to understand the man guarding them. Where does Clyde Lee Conrad's story actually begin?
Well, his origins were incredibly ordinary. Born around 1947 or 1948, he grew up in Ohio. He was known as a pretty quiet student, involved in track and the rifle team.
Okay, so pretty standard American upbringing.
Yeah, very typical. He joined the U.S. Army in 1965, served as an infantryman, and it actually completed a combat tour in Vietnam.
So he puts in his time in combat, he works his way up. How does a standard infantryman end up with his hands on the nuclear codes in Europe?
Because he was highly competent. And that competence led to a promotion to Sergeant First Class and a really crucial assignment in West Germany. He was placed in the G3 War Plans section of the 8th Infantry Division.
And that's part of the V Corps, right?
Yes, V Corps. And to understand the strategic weight of V Corps, you really have to look at the geography. They were tasked with guarding the Fulda Gap.
Okay, the Fulda Gap. For you listening,
Yeah.
That's the lowland corridor between the mountains, right? Like the exact route the Soviets would have to use if they wanted to roll their tank divisions into West Germany.
That's the one. It was the absolute tip of the spear. NATO expected that if a Soviet armored thrust came, it was coming right through the Fulda Gap.
So the people stationed there are holding the line.
Exactly. And because of that, the G3 War Plans section held the absolute most sensitive documents in the European theater. Over time, Conrad became so indispensable at managing these files that commanders actually nicknamed him Mr. Plans.
Mr. Plans.
Wow. But his competence led to a massive violation of basic security protocols. The military allowed Conrad to consolidate two roles that should have always been separate.
Let me guess. He got too much access.
Way too much. He became both the top-secret document custodian and the document reproduction control NCO.
Okay, let's unpack this, because that sounds like a massive red flag. He's the guy in charge of guarding the original documents, and he's also the guy in charge of the photocopier.
Yep.
This is like making the same person the bank manager and the chief bank auditor.
Yeah.
How did the military let one guy have a complete intelligence monopoly?
Bureaucratic convenience, honestly. Counterintelligence principles dictate you always separate those duties. But, commanders are often focused on operational efficiency.
Right, they just want the job done.
Exactly. Conrad made things run smoothly. He was trusted. Officers even intervened to keep him in that specific post because he made their jobs easier. He literally held the keys to the vault and the machine that could duplicate the roughly 1,000 highly classified documents inside it.
It's the classic insider threat. The system only works if you trust the person holding the keys.
Right.
But a foreign intelligence service isn't just going to, knock on the door of the vault and ask for the files. They need a vulnerability to exploit. What was Conrad's weak point?
Financial stress. It's one of the most common systemic vulnerabilities you'll see in counterintelligence. Conrad was living in West Germany, supporting his German wife Anna and their 3 children on an NCO's salary.
which couldn't have been much back then.
No, his take-home pay was only about $764 a month. It simply wasn't enough, and he fell deep into debt. Like, debt collection letters were actually being sent directly to his commander.
Wait, really? If you're struggling to pay the bills and your commander's getting notices about it, that feels like a moment where the military should have stepped in and, I don't know, revoked his security clearance.
They absolutely should have. But instead, someone else noticed his desperation. Sergeant First Class Zoltan Sabo.
Okay, who is that?
Sabo was a decorated Vietnam veteran of Hungarian descent, and he was actually Conrad's supervisor. But Sabo was living a double life. Since 1971, he had been spying for the Hungarian Military Intelligence Service, the AVH.
Oh, wow. So he's right there in the unit.
Right. Sabo watched Conrad, noted the financial stress, and knew exactly what kind of access Mr. Plans had.
So Sabo realizes he has a guy with money problems sitting on a literal gold mine of intelligence. How does he actually make the pitch?
Well, in the autumn of 1975, Sabo casually approached Conrad and just mentioned that there was good business to be done.
Good business.
Yeah, and the historical assessments of what happened next are just staggering. Conrad didn't agonize over it. He didn't ask for time to think.
He just went for it.
He immediately agreed. He stated he was prepared to steal everything. They went straight from that conversation to Rose Barracks, pulled the first pile of documents, and within hours, those secrets were on their way to Budapest.
That speed is shocking. I mean, it wasn't a slow seduction. It was basically a fast food drive-through for espionage.
That's a great way to put it.
Was this purely a financial thing, or was there some sort of ideological component? Did he sympathize with the Warsaw Pact?
The intelligence assessments conclude it was driven almost entirely by pure greed. Conrad viewed national security information as a personal commodity.
It's your product to sell.
Exactly. But to move the sheer volume of paper Conrad wanted to sell, he couldn't do it alone. It created a logistical nightmare. To scale his operation, he needed a network.
So how did they build the ring?
Initially, Sabo handled the transport.
Right.
Well, when Sabo retired from the U.S. military, he transitioned to become a handler and cut out on the outside. And Conrad, who was now codenamed Charlie, took over the inside job completely.
But if they're moving that much classified paper, how are they getting it across borders? West Germany was crawling with counterintelligence.
Sabo brought in couriers, specifically the Kirksik brothers, Sandor and Imre. They were Hungarian-born but naturalized Swedish citizens, and both were practicing medical doctors.
Oh, that's smart.
Very smart. Their Swedish passports allowed them to travel freely as neutrals, and they used their doctor's bags to physically transport classified documents from West Germany to Vienna and Budapest.
Because nobody's going to search a doctor's medical bag at a border checkpoint.
Exactly. They were hiding in plain sight.
So Conrad has his couriers, but he also had to manage things on the inside, right? Especially as he got closer to his own retirement.
Right. He needed successors, so he began recruiting his own subordinates. He was literally franchising out treason. The most notable recruit was Roderick Ramsey.
Tell me about Ramsey.
Ramsey was brilliant. He reportedly had the second highest IQ ever recorded in the Army. But he was also a drug-dependent soldier who felt deeply alienated. Conrad cultivated him, and in 1983, Ramsey became the alternate document custodian.
Okay, Ramsey had the second highest IQ recorded in the Army. How does Conrad, who is described as a pretty ordinary NCO, manipulate someone that smart into high treason? I mean, this is like a morbid, multi-level marketing scheme.
Well, intelligence does not equal emotional resilience, you know. Ramsey was isolated and addicted. Conrad didn't appeal to his intellect, he appealed to his vulnerabilities. He offered Ramsey attention, a sense of belonging, and cash to fund his drug habits.
That makes sense.
And Ramsey wasn't the only one. They recruited Jeffrey Rondeau and Jeffrey Gregory, paying them in hashish, cocaine, and a few $100s to haul heavy duffel bags full of secrets off the base.
Duffel bags. Good grief.
Yeah. And later, in 1986, they recruited a clerk typist named Kelly Therese Warren to keep the documents flowing after Conrad officially retired.
So what does this all mean in terms of the actual payload? To justify paying all these couriers and clerks, what exactly were they stealing?
They stole the absolute crown jewels of NATO's defense structure. First, the NATO General Defense Plans, or GDPs. These documents detailed exact unit placements, fallback lines, and operational strategies in case of war.
Wait, fallback lines?
Oh.
If your enemy knows your fallback lines, they can just pre-target those coordinates with artillery. You'd be retreating right into a slaughter.
Precisely. The Warsaw Pact knew exactly where every NATO tank, artillery piece, and soldier would be. But the conventional plans were just the beginning. The most devastating leaks involved nuclear intelligence.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. Conrad compromised the emergency action procedures and the SIOP. That's the single integrated operational plan, the master blueprint for a nuclear strike.
Right.
And he handed over the nuclear go codes and the manuals for the permissive action links, or PALs.
Okay, I've heard of PLs described as the physical locks on nuclear weapons. But, I mean, how does handing over a manual for a lock actually help the Soviets? It's not like they could walk up to a missile silo and pick it with a bobby pin.
Well, a PL isn't a simple padlock. It's a complex cryptographic device wired directly into the warhead's detonation system. By handing over the technical manuals and the emergency procedures, Conrad gave the Soviets the ability to understand the circuitry and the command and control logic.
So they could bypass it.
Worse, military experts concluded that Soviet Spetsnaz teams could have used this knowledge to insert faulty codes into the system, effectively bricking the weapons.
Wait, really?
Yes. They could have triggered a nuclear stand-down, rendering the West's entire deterrent completely useless.
If they have the PLs and the go codes, they could essentially lock us out of our own weapons.
Exactly. And on top of that, they also leaked French reinforcement plans and the highly classified technical specifications for the new M1 Abrams tank, which allowed the Soviets to identify vulnerabilities in its armor.
It's just a complete structural compromise of the Western alliance. But which brings us back to the logistics. If you're stealing the blueprints to the M1 Abrams and manuals for nuclear warheads, you aren't just walking out with a few pieces of paper in your pocket.
Right.
How did they physically smuggle out this immense volume of data right under NATO's nose? What was their tradecraft?
Interestingly, the Hungarians offered Conrad high-tech espionage gear like miniature Minox cameras, but Conrad flat out refused them.
Why?
Because they were too hard to explain. He argued that if counterintelligence ever searched his quarters, a miniature spy camera is impossible to explain away. So he insisted on using standard, mundane equipment. He actually rented a secret apartment in the town of Bad Kreuznach solely to photograph documents.
So he's just using normal cameras.
At first, yes. But photographing tens of thousands of pages manually takes forever. The real operational innovation came from Rod Ramsey.
The genius.
Right. Ramsey had the idea to use a standard video camera to film the documents. They would lay the pages down and just record them onto American format VHS tapes. But wouldn't a border guard just pop the tape into a player and immediately see highly classified documents?
That's where Ramsey's brilliance came in. First, they would start recording halfway through a standard, innocent movie like a Disney film.
Okay.
But more importantly, they exploited a technical reality. The United States used the NTSC video format, while most of Europe, including Germany, used PAL or CCAM formats.
Ah, the formatting mismatch.
Exactly. If a German border guard took Ramsey's tape and put it into a standard European video player, the formatting mismatch meant the screen would just show static. The tape was completely unreadable unless you had American equipment.
Using a Disney movie and formatting mismatches to hide nuclear launch codes is like a villain's plot in a bad spy movie, but it actually worked.
It worked flawlessly, and it gets even more intense. Ramsey also designed a custom-rigged briefcase for transport. It had a hidden lever. If the courier was ever detained, they just pulled the lever, which would drag the VHS tape through heavy rare earth magnets.
Oh, wow. Wiping the data instantly.
Instantly, before the briefcase was even opened. How long can a security apparatus reasonably defend against such adaptable tradecraft? I mean, that is dark creativity.
It's very hard to defend against. And Conrad wasn't content just selling this to Hungary. Under an initiative dubbed Operation Allen, Conrad and Sabo started double-dipping.
What does that mean?
They took the exact same intelligence they were giving to the Hungarians and sold it to the Czechoslovak Intelligence Service, the STB, who then funneled it to the KGB. They operated under the codenames Richard and Messon, pulling in hundreds of thousands of dollars more for the exact same work.
Okay, but eventually, the sheer volume of money and material creates a footprint, right?
Yeah.
How does a guy on an NCO pension hide that kind of cash?
He doesn't, really. And that footprint is finally what triggered Western counterintelligence. By the late 1970s, CIA sources behind the Iron Curtain were reporting that NATO war plans were arriving in Budapest by the kilogram.
By the kilogram. That is terrifying.
Yeah, they knew they had a massive leak. This launched a joint probe by the CIA and the Army Foreign Counterintelligence Activity dubbed Operation Cana Player.
So they know there's a leak, but they have to find one guy among, what, 60,000 soldiers in V Corps?
Exactly. But they followed the financial trail. Investigators narrowed the suspect pool, and Conrad's lavish lifestyle made him stand out. He had a driveway with a silver Audi, his wife drove a custom Volkswagen, and he openly bragged to neighbors about his collection of gold Krugerrands.
That is, I mean, that's just arrogant.
Very. And the bank deposits were a huge red flag. He was depositing massive amounts of cash, but trying to be smart about it by smurfing.
Smurfing.
Yeah, he'd take roughly $24,000 and deposit it in chunks just under the $10,000 limit because he knew banks had to report anything over $10K to the IRS. But doing that repeatedly is a crime in itself, and it sets off alarms.
Right. So they see the money, they know it's him. How do they actually catch him?
To get hard evidence, the FCA deployed Master Sergeant Danny Wilson, designated as Source 170. Wilson was a career counterintelligence soldier who befriended Conrad, pretended to be disillusioned, and got him to talk.
And it worked.
Oh, it worked. Conrad was so arrogant that he actually gave Wilson floppy disks containing his Operations Plan 001.
Wait, he typed out his espionage business plan and saved it on a floppy disk. Was it arrogance that made him keep copies of his own treason?
Pure arrogance. It was a literal blueprint for a massive spy ring. But even with that, arresting Conrad required dismantling the whole network.
Right, because he's got all these guys under him.
Exactly. And the real interrogation breakthrough came with Rod Ramsey. FBI Special Agent Joe Navarro, a pioneer in behavioral analysis, was sent to interview him.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because Navarro didn't have hard physical evidence to arrest him yet, right?
Right. He just engaged Ramsey in a casual, hours-long conversation to establish a baseline of his body language. Navarro was looking for physiological responses that the conscious mind can't control, specifically the fight or flight response.
The adrenaline dump.
Exactly.
Ah.
During the interview, Navarro casually dropped the name Clyde Lee Conrad. And when Ramsey heard that name, his hand, which was holding a cigarette, began shaking uncontrollably.
Like a nervous tick.
Navarro later described it as shaking like a seismograph. It was an involuntary reaction. Ramsey's massive intellect couldn't stop his body from reacting to the danger. Navarro zeroed in on that specific behavioral tell, applying pressure until Ramsey finally broke and confessed, detailing the entire network.
That contrast is just amazing to me. They used rigged magnetic briefcases and international video formats, but the whole thing unraveled because of a shaking hand holding a cigarette.
It's the deeply human flaw that always brings it down.
So they have the confession, they have the floppy disk. Why couldn't the U.S. Justice Department just kick down Conrad's door and arrest him?
Because of a jurisdictional nightmare known as SIA, the Classified Information Procedures Act. It creates a legal paradox known as gray mail. The U.S. Justice Department couldn't prosecute Conrad in an American court because the Pentagon refused to declassify the stolen documents for the trial.
Wait, I need to wrap my head around this. To convict him, the prosecution would have to present the stolen documents to the jury to prove what he stole. So it's like trying to prosecute a bank robber. But the bank refuses to let the police tell the jury that any money was actually stolen because they don't want the public to know the vault was left unlocked.
That is the perfect analogy. The Pentagon faced an agonizing choice. Do they declassify the nuclear go codes and NATO defense plans in an open courtroom, confirming to the Soviets that the plans were genuine? Or do they let a traitor walk free?
Isn't it terrifying that our own classified information laws almost created a shield for the worst traitor in our history?
It is. And because Conrad was retired and living as a civilian in West Germany, the military couldn't court-martial him either.
So how did they solve it?
The German solution. The U.S. had to hand the entire case over to West German authorities, the BKA, which leads back to that dramatic August 23, 1988 raid we started with. The BKA arrested Conrad at his breakfast table. The German court system handed the trial in Koblenz, where they had different rules for classified evidence.
So the Koblenz trial actually worked.
Yes. In June 1990, Judge Ferdinand Schuth delivered the verdict. He sentenced Conrad to life imprisonment, plus an additional 4 years for the Czech espionage, and a 2.2 million mark fine.
Wow. So with the trial concluded and Conrad finally put away, the intelligence community could step back and do a full damage assessment. When you look at the strategic impact, how bad was it?
The professional military assessment was historically grim. The judge himself stated that NATO would have been forced to choose between capitulation or turning Germany into a nuclear wasteland. The Soviet bloc gained an advantage that negated NATO's entire defensive posture.
And what about the financial cost to fix all this?
Astronomical. The NSA had to completely overhaul its crypto and nuclear validation systems at a cost of millions of dollars.
When we compare this to other major spies, where does he rank? Like, if Aldrich Ames gave away the who of our intelligence, did Conrad essentially give away the how and the where of our entire military?
That is exactly how intelligence historians assess it.
Well,
While others gave up names, which is horrific, Conrad gave up the entire structural defense of the West. Many consider him the most damaging espionage breach of the Cold War.
so what was the legacy of all this? What happened to the rest of the network?
Sabo, the original recruiter, got a 10-month suspended sentence in Austria for cooperating. Ramsey got 36 years, Gregory and Rondeau got 18 years each, and Kelly Therese Warren was sentenced to 25 years.
And Conrad's end.
He died of a heart attack in a German prison in 1998 at age 50. But there is a really bitter irony here. Because he was convicted in Germany, the U.S. government could not legally strip him of his military benefits. He continued to draw his U.S. Army pension until his death.
Wait, really? He sold out the Western world, and the U.S. military still had to mail him a check every month?
Every month. He belongs to the infamous club of big money spies, making over $1 million, alongside guys like Robert Hansen, John Walker, and Larry Wu Tai-chin. And there is a deeply tragic connection to Aldrich Ames, too.
What's the connection?
The initial U.S. investigation into Conrad was tipped off by a GRU source named Vladimir Vasilev. Years later, Vasilev was the exact source betrayed to the Soviets by Aldrich Ames, and he was executed.
Oh, wow. That's dark. Looking at Hansen, Walker, and Conrad are our worst enemies, always the ones who already have the keys to the front door.
It certainly seems that way. The insider threat is always the most dangerous.
The scale of this case is just incredible. One man, motivated by nothing more than greed, effectively dismantled the defense of Western Europe. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into intelligence history.
You know, we know the Warsaw Pact had Conrad's plans, but we have to wonder if the Berlin Wall hadn't fallen just 1 year after Conrad's arrest, would the Soviets have eventually been emboldened to actually use those blueprints to launch a first strike?
That is a chilling thought to leave on. Keep questioning the world around you because the surface rarely tells the whole story. Until next time.